you can go to these multi tens of thousands of dollar conferences or buy a coach or all these fancy things. Those aren't wrong. But I'll tell you what, all you really need is yourself, a quiet place, and a journal.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. Today, I am very excited to have Dr. Jill, who is a functional medicine expert. She uses functional medicine to help patients find the root cause of their illness and identify nutritional and biochemical imbalances that may be contributing to your symptoms. Dr. Jill will search for underlying triggers that contribute to your illness through cutting-edge lab testing and tailor the intervention to your specific individual needs. She uses nutrition, supplements, lifestyle changes, or medication to treat your illness, and always seeks the gentlest and least invasive way to help you find hope, restore health, and optimize healing. She is a dually board certified in family medicine and in integrative holistic medicine. She founded the Methodist Center for Integrative Medicine in Illinois in 2009. She is a survivor of both breast cancer and Crohn's disease, and she's passionate about teaching patients how to live well and thrive in the midst of complex and chronic illness. Dr. Jill, the list of accolades can go on, but I definitely want to get into it. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you so much, Tailor. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, so let's start a little bit with your journey of how you got to kind of get into the work and get interested in what you're doing today.
Yes, I didn't really know I was a healer until later in the journey, but I grew up on a farm in Illinois, one of 5 children. My mother was a retired nurse, and we grew our own vegetables and fruits. We had an apple orchard. We do cider in the fall. So I kind of grew up with the earth and the crops and the land and knowing that there was healing power in food, and we went to regular doctors and everything, but there was this idea that there was more to health than just medications, even from birth. Like I grew up in this, like there's food and it nourishes us and we grow our own food. And again, we weren't radical or anything. It was kind of a typical farm family in Illinois. But the nice thing was there was that foundation of understanding that healing can come from the air that we breathe, the food that we eat, and all of that. And so it was the least likely for me to go into conventional medicine. But what I realized as I started applying after undergraduate was, even though I didn't agree 100% with all the conventional things like medication for every ailment, right? There's a place for medication, but it's certainly not the answer to complex and chronic illness. And I knew that going in. But what I realized was, why not have someone like myself or like other people that are doing this go into the system, learn the system, because right now it's still the most reimbursed system in the US, and change the way we do medicine. So I really literally went into medical school with this heart of like, I want to learn the best medicine right now in this conventional system, but I really had a heart of a more naturopathic or holistic healer. And then what happened in my journey was, in my third year of medical school, right in the midst of my surgery rotation, I found a lump in my breast. And turns out a few weeks later, I had a biopsy and I was given the diagnosis of aggressive breast cancer at 25. And I was literally the youngest person ever to be diagnosed at Loyola University at that time. Now, since then, sadly, there's been a lot more. So it was really a big shift to go from doctor to patient. And then I took a leave of absence. I actually did a very aggressive conventional regimen. But during that, I also saw a naturopath. I did prayer and meditation. I did all kinds of other things. And 9 months later, I was considered cured. And then shortly after that, about 6 months later, I was still having fevers. I was not well. I had lost all my hair. My gut was destroyed by chemo. And I woke up in the ER one morning with a diagnosis of Crohn's disease. So that was kind of my other education on that realm of really what it is to be patient and what it is to deal with autoimmunity, complex chronic illness, cancer. And that's when I really understood healing at a different level, going through it as a patient.
Yeah. And now you're helping many other patients, which is amazing. And I know you recently just came out with a book. Is it out yet? The Unexpected book?
Yeah, it's out. It came out in March through Forefront, and it's interesting because there's a lot of our colleagues and friends that write these how-to books, and they're wonderful, and I have tons of them on my shelves. But my heart was always like, gosh, I have to tell my story because it's so compelling. The fact that the book is all about resilience, and that's why I love talking to you about high performance. It's really so aligned, because whether we have illness or don't have illness, we can still be resilient and high performance in the midst of that. And that's a mindset, and that's the types of things we do to our body. And we can talk all about that. But the idea was to give a manual of this. It revolves around my story, right? But the truth is, the reader hopefully is just seeing a reflection of themselves in their journey and seeing the hope and the healing and the resilience that can come with the mindset, with the principles of functional medicine, with flow states, which I'm sure you've talked about before, talk a lot about. So all these things I wanted to share from my own journey, because medical school was one thing, but the cancer and the Crohn's and all the diagnoses I've had have been far deeper and greater teachers than any professor in a medical school.
Yeah, yeah. And I know, 10 years ago when I was going through my own health challenges with so much pain and inflammation in my fingers, hands, arms that I had to use a voice dictation software for a couple years. And so I remember when I was in that pain, to go back to what you just mentioned, I thought it was the absolute worst thing that could happen to me. My life was over. How am I ever going to work again? I only know how to work on a computer and I can't even type, and all these thoughts and negative, and you really get in like a negative spiral. And by the way, even people who aren't, imagine how bad it is when you have like something really debilitating, like an autoimmune disease, or something even worse than what I had. But even just in general, I even notice even myself and many people that I know who don't have an autoimmune or some really, really debilitating thing, still oftentimes have those thoughts, in your head about like, oh, is this, this, and kind of getting down on yourself. So I really love your message, and I'd love to talk a little bit more about resilience. So if someone's listening right now and let's say they're like, "Oh, I'm having trouble losing weight, or I have no energy, I can't sleep good," or whatever the case may be, what's the message to those people?
Well, it's interesting because we got on this podcast and I looked behind your head and it says always be learning.
Mm-hmm.
And I immediately love you because for my yearbook back in my high school days, my senior saying was learn as if you were going to live forever and live as if you're going to die tomorrow. Now that's not my quote. It's some famous person. I don't even know who it is, but that idea of every single circumstance has value. And suffering is not fun, but it is inevitable. And the sooner we realize that we all suffer and we all either have just gotten out of something, we're going through it right now, or it's coming up. And the sooner we realize that and don't be shocked by suffering, it's part of humanity. It's part of life. So when we start to, instead of resist that suffering that comes, we embrace it as a teacher. It doesn't mean it's easy. Believe me, I was crying and bald and so sick from chemo. And I remember those days of like, why is this happening to me? That, not really like questioning, but just the pain and suffering is no fun. And I know you know what that's like too. But resilience is the mindset around how do we view difficulties, pain, and suffering. And if we can reframe them as maybe the best thing that's ever happened, that sounds bizarre if you're going through something right now, but I'll tell you what, my cancer in that moment turned out to be the best thing for my education, for my career, for my health even. Because all of a sudden I realized the toxic chemicals from my farm and from my makeup and beauty products were killing me. And I changed everything at 26, 27 years old. And that probably has allowed me to be a lot healthier now in my 40s because I knew something that I didn't know. And then the other piece about it is the deepest compassion and empathy can only come from experiencing suffering. We can only extend that to those around us. And for me as a healer, one of my greatest gifts is when I can really be compassionate to my patients in their suffering and understand what they're going through. And then the resilience comes from this experience of going through something really, really tough. And on the other side, we're like, oh my goodness, I didn't know I had it in me, right? And when we come out that other side, perfect example, I have never climbed in my life. And when I was writing my book, I had a writing coach who was a professional climber. And one day in the coffee shop, he said, hey, Jill, you want to climb the Flatirons? Now, I don't know if you know Boulder, Colorado, but the Flatirons are huge, iconic mountains behind me. And they're like thousands of feet in the air. They're huge. They're enormous. And professional climbers climb them. I don't. I was a novice, but he said that. I thought, why not? Let's try. I got on that rock with zero training. I had never even been in a rock climbing gym, not once. I had shoes. That was it. And he brought the gear, the helmet, the ropes. He gave me a 10 to 15-minute lesson and I climbed that. 3.5 hours later, I got to the top. And that was one of the most potent moments in my life for resilience because I thought that was something I never in a million years thought I could do. I didn't think I had it in me. But as I put myself out there and trusted the process and got up to that top, even though I was scared to death, I realized, oh my goodness, I can do hard things. And I think the more we have suffering, difficulties, experience, and we actually overcome them, it builds in us the resilience to trust and know that we will have what it takes for the next thing that comes our way.
I absolutely love what you just said, especially the part about And people, if when you're in the moment, it's so hard to see that this could be the best thing that ever happened to you. But I always say the same exact thing that you did. The pain that I went through was the best thing that ever happened to me because it sent me on this health journey. It taught me so many lessons, right? And so it absolutely, and so I think that's inspiring for people listening now to hear that, you know, the pain, whatever you're going through in your life, it could actually be the best thing that could ever happen to you. Now, when listening now, you're probably getting annoyed. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah,
You don't know. I'm
exactly.
insane. You know, like that's exactly how I was. If someone would have said that to me in the moment, it's only in hindsight, looking back, that you can actually, you know,
Yeah.
see what a teacher it is and what a learning it is. And certainly for me, a lot of personal development and growth that I've done, I think one of the biggest things that I've learned that has benefited me is also when I am feeling down, if you know whether I'm under the weather or whatever it is and I'm feeling down, just kind of understanding and, like you said, being compassionate with myself about, hey, you know, it's okay, you're not every day is going to be the best day. You know, today is not the best day. Okay, let's just, you know, maybe take it easy today, get through it, be kind to myself, and tomorrow's a new day. And when I can see it that way and understand, I think the issue is, right, and with a lot of with the whole depression epidemic and everything else, is that you're in this bad feeling, but you don't ever see a way out of it, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I also, like you said, what you said about resilience and doing hard things. I always, even, you know, even though I think sometimes, even now, I'm like, yes, I'm working out hard and doing things like that, but still for me, that's comfortable, right? So doing things that
Yeah.
are more uncomfortable, I think, in building resilience is also very important. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, it can be climbing a mountain, but whenever we put it, and honestly, with neuroplasticity, flow states, all these amazing things we can do with our brain and our
Hmm.
mind has a power to overcome, most of them involve a challenge to skills ratio. This has actually been studied in flow states. And what happens is if it's something we've done every day for, 10 years, it's boring. We know how to do it. We almost don't even have to think. So that is the skills very, very low and it's not challenging and we're kind of bored. If it's super, super difficult and absolutely impossible, the challenge is so high that we give up. But when they studied flow states, about 4%, crazy, I don't know how they came up with that, 4% above our standard like skill level. So it's higher than what we think we can do, but only by about 4%. It keeps our attention and focus and gets us into that flow state. And then all of a sudden we achieve this thing that we thought we couldn't do. So you want that challenge skills ratio to be about 4% above where you're at. And that's when you're going to get into this flow state, which let's talk briefly about that because I feel like that's such a key to performance and resilience. So flow states are that times and places where you are either musically in in making music, creating music, writing a book, writing creatively, out in nature with your dog, with your loved ones, doing sports that are extreme. And you can name 100 million things that are creative, artistic, or sports related. And for each person is different. And what happens in those states is they feel timeless. All of a sudden, 3 or 4 hours passes. We don't even realize the passage of time. It's effortless. It feels like we're not even using our brain. It's just going, it's flowing. It's the big wave surfers that are like, how did I just do that? Or me climbing that mountain saying, how in the world did I just accomplish that 1,000-foot climb when I've had no experience? And every time that effort and the challenge skill ratio takes us into a state of optimal neurotransmitter and optimal performance. So what happens is we have dopamine, we have serotonin, we have norepinephrine, we have epinephrine and anandamines, endorphins, all at the same time flowing through our brain. And as I've studied this, I believe it's not only a state of high performance, but it's a state of optimal healing. Stephen Kotler talks about in his latest book, The Art of Impossible, how he had Lyme disease and he started surfing. He could barely walk and he used that flow state to actually heal. So I believe it could be one of the most powerful healers. Now, the exciting thing is when we achieve that flow state, we literally have this thing. I love the term is called transient hypofrontality. And it sounds complex. All it means is we have this frontal cortex. It's like the judge. It's always judging everything that comes through like, oh, that what you wrote was stupid. Stop writing that. That's no good. Or, oh, you can't do that big wave, or you can't climb that mountain, or you can't create a new musical masterpiece. Our frontal cortex is the judge. It's always telling us what we can and can't do. And it's always getting in the way of optimal performance and creativity. When we get into a flow state, we have transient, meaning temporary, hypofrontality, meaning it goes away. The judge gets put in a locked case and says, don't tell me what to do. And all of a sudden we go to the muscles and the movement and the memory, and we don't have that judge telling us, and we can actually flow much more creatively. And sometimes I would say most of the time, that's where the genius, the creativity, the great symphonies, the great sports heroes. That's where that comes from. And I get really excited about that because I'm someone who loves flow states.
Oh, I love that. That's great. Yeah, and it reminds me recently I started playing, and this actually leads to another question I'd like to ask you. So recently I've started playing soccer again, which I just absolutely love, and I've just been enjoying it so much. And also, we had a soccer tournament that I was invited to for over 40 soccer tournament last weekend, and it was like there's 4 games in 2 days. I'm like, wait a minute, I haven't played more than one game a week in many many years, like I gotta so it was a little bit of a stretch, but it was maybe just like a 4% stretch for me, and we did
Yeah.
it, and I felt great and I felt amazing. But one thing that a lot of people probably have this in their lives as well, and for myself, even when I tell people like, oh yeah, I'm going to my soccer game or something, they're like, what, soccer? Like, are you crazy? You're gonna get hurt, don't do it. Like, and just like this, all these, and then one guy happens to be like a foot surgeon, and he's like, oh, do you know how many people I've had to do surgery on because of playing soccer or playing this or doing that? And like, it's just like all this negative talk, and I just want to be like, please just shut up. I just want to like, don't I don't want these
Okay.
negative limiting beliefs affecting me, right? And so I'm curious, like, what your thoughts are. Like, how do you deal with all other people telling you, "Oh, that's crazy. Yo, you don't need to do that," or people trying to kind of bring you back into your comfort zone when you're trying to push out of it a little bit?
Oh, I love this. Taylor, we are on the same wavelength. First of all, it's interesting because my book is called Unexpected, but if I really had the full title, I think it would be Unexpected Miracles. And the idea there isn't any religious thing. I do have a deep faith, but it's not about that. It's more about the idea that when we have a mindset expecting the unexpected, expecting that we will have answers when we need them, expecting that we will get healed, that we will get out of this situation, that you will have a great game playing soccer and you won't get hurt, those expectations actually drive reality. And
Hmm.
it's science to back this up. So what I love to think about is there's a chapter 4 in my book is called Believe, Act, Wait. And this is a great, what I did, it's so funny when you write a book, you really realize the theories of your life. It actually is good to kind of clarify. And as I was writing, this actually came out over and over and over again. This happened to me. And what it was I took a circumstance like I'm in this great job in Illinois with a medical directorship of a hospital at integrative program. And all of a sudden my ex-husband now said, let's move out to Colorado. Let's start over. I was like, oh my goodness, what do I do? Right. But I believed that there was a new opportunity there and that it was going to be better, even though I was leaving everything that was safe, a salary position, everything that seemed like safety, right. And security. And I believed, and I left everything, sold everything we owned, moved to Colorado and started a new practice with no guarantee, no salary. It was all on my own. And then the act is doing the part that you can. That was me putting in my notice, selling my house, moving to Colorado, and assuming that I would have the opportunities when I got there, even though I had nothing moving out there. And then the wait part is whether it's the divine or the universe or for you, whatever piece that is of the piece that you cannot accomplish on your own. You see, believe, you act, and then you wait and you expect the miracles, the unexpected, the things that you need, the resources to come as you manifest and put that out there, and it happens. And I saw that that's just one little example, but over and over and over and over again in my life, I would believe for something that seems crazy, like a huge dream, a huge idea, something that seemed totally impossible. I would act. I would do what I could, like go to school or do this piece or learn this part, do what I could, what was in my control. And then there was always a piece that I needed that was way outside of my control. And that's the wait part, the expect part, the pray, the meditate part, the manifest part. And that formula really, really has worked over and over and over to get to a place where it was totally out of my league and out of my expectations, but was right in line with what I wanted to achieve.
Yes, I love that, and I do the same thing. Every morning, Monday through Friday, I go out and I spend time doing visualization, gratitude, affirmations, appreciation, having faith and belief
Yes.
in the things that
Yes.
I want to manifest as well. And yeah, it's the same thing, right? Everyone was like, "No, don't play soccer," and then all of a sudden, I started playing. And guess what? I played for a long time. I didn't get hurt. And then, I got a really bad sprained ankle and I was out for a few months. Well, guess what? When that happened, I said, okay, this is an opportunity. I'm going to go through all the best ankle exercises and I'm going to come back. My ankle is going to be stronger than it was before I got injured. And that's exactly what happened. And I did that. And then I started playing again. So I just really love this about resiliency and adversity and overcoming it. But really also, I think the toughest part for most people, I know it's been tough for me, and I've done a lot of work and training and studying on this, is just really the always remembering that you can, you're setting the intention, remembering to set the intention, like you just spoke about, and remembering, like, so when these people, I have to come home and say, after I just got bombarded with 3 different people telling me that I'm going to get hurt, I have to then come home, say, get it, and then I have to say to myself, I'm going to play, I'm going to have a great game, I'm going to be healthy, I'm going to come through it, it's going to be a great tournament, and then I'm going to be just fine after, right? And so, but you have to constantly do that, especially if you have a lot of people giving you negative talk. It's really important to, I don't know if there's any tricks or tips to be more aware of constantly setting new intentions every day,
I love that. And so practically, I think you're right. Number one is this constantly your self-talk. You really need to think about, maybe write down, what is your self-talk? That's your frontal cortex. We talked about transient hypofrontality. That's the judge. And it might be like, oh, you idiot. Oh, why did you mess up again? Oh, you're just going to get hurt. If that's your programming, you must go and recorrect. You must rewrite the script. And that involves, I did a lot of work with neuro-linguistic programming, which is a science-based protocols that really, how do you train your mind of what you're saying to yourself? And that's what you're saying. And it could be through meditation or prayer or journaling or whatever. So that's one piece, is being aware of what's actually in your recording in your mind and changing the script. Number one. Number two, back right after I had mold related illness when I moved out here, got really sick from that, ended up becoming a mold expert because I had to heal myself. And after that, I was really, really struggling with my health again. And I started meditating, and every day I would go out and say, every day in every way, I'm stronger and healthier, wealthier and more resilient, younger and more beautiful. I will overcome all obstacles. I will outlast all adversity. Things are turning in my favor. And for me, I have a very strong faith. And so those actually tied to some other promises I felt like were from the divine. And I wrote it out with those things. But I repeated that over and over and over again. Now it's just like, as you can see, it's part of me. And it's funny because back then when I started that, like wealthy, I really don't care about wealth for the sake of wealth. I care about wealth for doing good for people and for buying freedom and opportunities for myself and others. So it's not about me accumulating wealth. So even saying that, I was like, oh, but that was a prototype in my, because if you have a fear of money, you're not going to be able to receive abundance. And I had to shift that and be okay with saying, I want to be wealthy, not for myself. I don't want to accumulate things, but I want to do good in this world. And I can only do good if I have that ability to do it through wealth. And more beautiful. That was the last thing I said. And again, I hope I'm not a vain person. Beauty is not my primary goal. But once again, it was like, I want to shine with light and love and compassion. And for me, that's how and so I started saying those things, even though in the beginning, my subconscious was like, who are you to say you want to be wealthy? Who are you to say you want to be beautiful? But you know what? Now I'm okay with it. And I'm happy about that. And I feel like a lot of those things have manifested in my life. But it's that program that we have, that script, and we cannot change it until we're aware of it. And a lot of this comes from our childhood, our parents, our grandparents, and what they were programmed. And we just hear those things and we assume those things about money, about relationships, about life, about our health. And we really, our cells won't manifest good things if we have the wrong script. So we have to examine this and we have to change that script if it's unhealthy for us.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely, and I actually got certified in 2007 in
Ah,
neuro-linguistic programming
NLP.
as well. And one of the most
Amazing.
important things it taught me was, one thing that I became very aware after going through that training was, when people would talk, you can literally hear their belief systems by the
Yes.
language that they're using. It's really incredible. And so, like, when you hear someone who doesn't think they can do something or is down on themselves because of this or that, and it's like, oh, that's a limiting belief system. Maybe I can help them turn that
Yeah.
around or something like that. But yeah, it's so important. And I actually have a journal that the first thing I do when I go outside for my morning quiet time, I open it to this page in the journal, and it says, the thoughts that would serve me the most are, and then it's like, I'm happy and grateful and have a positive mental attitude every day. I'm happy and appreciate my life. I have a great life. I love my life and what I get to do every day. I love my family. I'm so grateful for our health and happiness. And I do a visualization of me, my wife, and my daughters all living to over 100 years old as a
Ah,
close-knit, happy, healthy family that spends holidays and family vacations together every year. And so I'm purposely just
yeah.
filling my mind over and over. Literally, it's not fancy. It's like I'm
Yeah.
trying to brainwash myself, and I'm talking about hundreds of days, thousands of days where I've done this, and I still need to continue to do it. If I go a couple weeks without doing it, sometimes it's not as ingrained. So just trying to ingrain this as much as possible I think is a great tip for people.
And Delora, I want to talk about something you said there that's so critical. You can go to these multi tens of thousands of dollar conferences or buy a coach or all these fancy things. Those aren't wrong, but I'll tell you what, all you really need is yourself, a quiet place, and a journal. You
Hmm.
can make this very simple. And literally, I look back at my life, and one of the biggest things around my success was just daily habits, just like brushing my teeth and exercising and reading journals and like some of the really, really, really simple stuff. I just did it every single day, even boring day after day after day. And what I look back and realize is I'm not that smart. I'm not that talented. And so much of success or things that I've done has been related to habits, simple, simple, free habits. And I love saying that because again, there are so many programs out there now. There's so many coaches. There's so many promises. And a lot of you are like, oh, well, I can't afford that course or that training or that thing. You don't need to. And you know what I did a lot was read a book. I read a book from an author. I didn't pay for a course. And then I would take notes on that book. So I just want to empower your listeners to say you don't have to spend a lot of money. You don't have to spend any money except for a $3 journal. Like you
Yeah.
could literally go that simple in a pen that you love. Now I do think a good pen that you love is important because you're right. You want this to be feeling good, but like simple, simple stuff. And honestly, it comes down to those daily habits. What do you do on a daily basis? What do you spend your time doing? And nowadays what's happened is this addictive device called the iPhone
Hmm.
is most of the time taking up way more time than we want it to. So one little trick I would say is turn off all of your notifications. You get the back of the control. You don't let that phone control you. And what happens is nowadays you have all these notifications and they trip you up. You're trying to write a paper, you're trying to meditate, and those notifications go off and they interrupt your cycle and call your attention to this device. Again, there's a purpose for it, but I want to be in control over that device, not the device over control of me. So I think one of the best things you can do is turn off your notifications so that you can choose when you look at that phone and not let it control you.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Turn off the notifications. And even one step further, if you have social media, delete the apps from, and
Mm-hmm.
because that way, okay,
Yep.
if it's a weekend or whatever and you have downtime and you want to then download the app again and it takes you a minute. But for those quick impulses, when you're just like impulse and you grab your phone and then you go on social media, next thing you know, you wasted a half hour and then
Yes.
you feel
Yeah.
horrible about yourself for doing it. And then you just go in this, it's really not helpful. So, I think if you can stop those impulses and kind of train yourself. So again, I don't really use social media, but like,
Yeah.
one little platform that I'll do every, once a week or
Yep.
something, I delete it right away after because I know as well, I need to stop myself from those impulses. And I think everything we're talking about is just amazing. I think it's important to be so aware of your language, right? Because even what you said before, like if someone says, and I hear people say this all the time, they're like, I don't care about money. I don't need to make money. I don't care about money. And it's like, well, if you say that and you're putting that out in the universe,
Yeah.
you're not even giving yourself an opportunity to make a lot of money if that's your
Yeah.
belief system and your mindset and you're operating like that. I
Yeah.
think I have a much more similar mindset to you of that. Yes, I want a wealth and abundance because I believe that I will be a good steward of that money
Yes.
and I will do great things and help many people. In fact, one of the last thing, my last line on the thoughts that will serve me the most, it's something like, I'm just getting started. I have so much to do and so many people to
Yes.
help over the next 60 plus years because I plan to live over 100. So,
I love it. And I couldn't agree more because so often we're afraid to say I love money. I love the things that I can do to help the world with money. And I have no problem saying that because it's not, I know in my heart, I am not attached to that. I
mhm,
don't need it. And yet I know I can do a lot of good with it. And
mhm.
so that I have no problem, believing that and sharing that.
Exactly. Well, I love that you're a doctor and functional medicine expert, and we've been talking about what I believe is really the most important part here is the mindset and a lot of the skills and kind of mental side of things. But let's transition a little bit to more of
Sure.
the kind of physical aspect of things. Maybe people who are going through pain or have autoimmune or lacking energy, things of that nature. I know you're an expert in mold. I'm not sure. I don't know. Maybe that applies to a lot of people. Maybe not. I'm not sure. What are some
Sure.
of the most common things that you're seeing people come to you in your practice, and how are you able to guide them through those issues?
Okay, so I'm going to frame this because again, maybe your listeners are aware of functional medicine, maybe not as much, or but a couple of things. First of all, if you want to have great, so let's transition from our mindset, our performance, all these things we've been talking about to our health.
Mhm.
If your brain is inflamed, if you have toxic load, infectious burden, inflammatory cytokines, that is the number one cause of depression. And if you look at the research around cytokines and depression, most of the time it's actually inflammation in the brain. So,
Mhm.
granted, you don't feel well, you're depressed, and there's nothing wrong with medications or a psychologist or all those kinds of things that can help. But the truth is, the root is your physical body and the inflammation that can create the depression. So, this physical piece is huge. So, as I mentioned, usually in functional medicine, most of the complex chronic fatigue, depression, anxiety, sleep disorders, menopausal symptoms, hormonal issues, autoimmunity, and I could go on and on and on. But any of these things that are kind of puzzling for conventional medicine because a drug doesn't really cure these things that I'm talking about. Most of the time, at the root, it's toxic load, which again is invisible. Many people don't even know they're swimming in toxic soup, and infectious burden. So, how does that work? So mold is one of the big toxins that's hidden. Most people don't know if they're exposed, and it can be behind a wall, in a basement, by a window, in an attic. Mold will produce mycotoxins, so these small 2.5 microns and less, the VOCs, that are very, very toxic to the brain and nervous system. So frequently, people will have brain fog, fatigue, cognitive dysfunction, memory issues, gut issues, skin rashes. I could name any system and it could be related to mold. So often they don't know it, but they come to the doctor with new onset asthma, new onset rashes, new onset headaches, new onset mast cell activation syndrome, new onset cognitive disturbances. Just for reference, I work with Dr. Dale Bredesen, who's written The End of Alzheimer's, and he says that 1 in 3 of the early onset dementias is mold related. So that's how
Wow.
common it is. And again, most people don't know that unless they're aware of mold as a cause. So I ask those questions about when did this start? Did this start after you moved? So to try to figure out if it's environment. So if there's an environmental toxin like mold, heavy metals, excessive parabens, phthalates, PCBs, all these kinds of chemicals in our environment, or poor diet, that will weaken immune system. And then old things like Epstein-Barr that you got at 12 years old or 19 years old, or chickenpox at 5 years old, or maybe a tick bite that was not bothering you at 12 years old. And then these things can reactivate or cause inflammation as well. So toxic load and old infections are typically the two biggest things that are hidden and that patients maybe don't even know they have. So when I'm looking at root cause, I'm looking at toxic load and what can they do to live cleaner and feel better and decrease. I describe it as a bucket. We're all born with that bucket capacity. And as that bucket fills up over our lifetime with toxins, chemicals, phthalates, parabens, bad food, poor air quality, water, plastics, all of these things, then when it starts to spill over the top, we often present with cancer, with autoimmunity, and with neurodegenerative diseases or memory issues. And those are epidemic in proportion. So what I want to do is say, what's in your bucket and how do we decrease that load just enough to give you back some margin, because once you have margin, you can start to recover and do well, even if you still have something in that bucket. And then those infections can be reactivated too. So that's kind of how those two plays together. Mold in particular is insidious. As we have more hurricanes and water damage and things every day in the news, there's new natural disasters that involve water on porous materials. And so there's going to be mold growth. And most homes now are built very quickly. They're built sometimes when it's raining. And there's just so many reasons now where mold in homes it's at an all-time high and it's affecting people more than they even realize.
Is there a way then, for you, like, for example, I'm curious, do you buy like a mold test from Amazon and start testing your house? I mean, is this something that people might want to do, especially if I'm not as concerned about it. Maybe I'm wrong, but I live in the desert where it rains like 3 times a year. So I'm not as concerned about it. Although obviously I'm very concerned if there's, a leaky pipe under my sink that's just going
Yeah.
unnoticed for months. But yeah, is there a way for people to test to see if they have mold exposure or heavy metals as exposure as well, and then also is it practical to test your house?
Yes, on both accounts. So, with mold, there's no one test, but I'll go through a few things that might determine. First of all, history, which is free. So if you write down a timeline, when did you last feel well? And then make a timeline and all the events, and then when did you not start to feel well? And so you say December 2018, I didn't feel well. And then you might be, oh, well, we moved into our new home in August of 2018, and all my family's now sick. And so there might be some clues as you do a timeline of your illness and your health and when you last felt well. And especially now, mold can affect people differently. So you can have a household that has massive mold and the mother and the son are really ill and the father and the daughter are fine or just have a little sniffles. So that isn't a criteria because there are genetics that make some people more sick or more susceptible to mold. But if there's more than one person in your living environment that's not been well since you moved, that's a clue. How to test the home. I usually recommend, obviously, a good inspector would be amazing. And if you need resources, there's a nonprofit called International Society for Environmentally Acquired Illness, ISEAI.org, nonprofit. I'm on the board, but there's no, financial thing here. And they just have free resources. So if you want to know more, that's a great place to go, a clearinghouse of information, of mold inspectors, of doctors who know how to treat it. So that would be a great resource. But if you just want to know what's in your home, the easiest thing to do is a qPCR test. This is a dust sample that will test for your dust in your home and see if there's particulate from mold in your home. Now, if you find mold in your home, then you still have to say, well, where is it coming from? Is it old? Have we not cleaned for 2 years? Or have we cleaned diligently and there's still a source? But that's a great way to check your home without an inspector, just to see, to kind of screen. Then you need to find an inspector to say, where's this at? What's going on? All of that. But that's a great way. It's usually called ERMI, ERMI. And there's two big companies, Envirobiotics and Mycometrics, that do that. You can order directly. And I think there's a new test called the dust test as well, that is the same thing. And then your body. So if I'm a doctor, I'm looking for mold, I'll do a lot of blood tests that you would need a doctor's order for, but some of those are TGF beta, MMP9, VEGF, VEGF, ADH, osmolality, and those are MSH. Those are some of the common innate immune markers that get dysfunctional, usually high when you have a mold exposure. But again, that'd probably be best with your doctor. Then you ask, what else could a patient do themselves? When we're testing for toxic load and mycotoxins, meaning those toxins that mold produces in the body, we can actually test the urine for mycotoxins. And there's 3 companies now that do that testing. One is Real Time Labs, one is Vibrant Labs, and one is Mosaic Labs. They're all totally different technologies, but those are tests that a consumer could do to see. Now, just because you have mycotoxins in your urine does not mean you've had an exposure recently, or that, because it could come from food, there's other sources. But generally, if I have a picture of someone getting ill in an environment, there's mold in their dust and they have positive mycotoxins, the big picture is that there's probably a mold exposure.
Mm, that's great stuff. That's great stuff. A lot of people, if they feel they might have that issue, they're probably going to have to rewind that one a few times
Yeah.
and listen to that. But that was great. That was great rapid fire on that. What
And
about,
I'll just mention Tiller real quick,
yeah,
not to promote, but it's all in the
please.
book. So all the resources, if it's just unexpected. And again, if you want all the details, where to find it, the labs, all of that is in there too.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Yeah, absolutely. And I know we got a few more minutes, but then I definitely want you to tell everyone else where to follow you and get your book and everything else. But in the remaining minutes that we have, I do want to also ask you about, because you mentioned about the toxic makeup you were using and things like that. So maybe just some common everyday practical advice for people listening that are using certain using beauty products every day. I mean, every one of us is using soap and shampoo and
Yes.
deodorant, and most women are using makeup. So any advice there?
Well, the average woman puts on like 100 products on her body every day, which is crazy, but true. I know I used to do that. And if you're not careful about where those are coming from. So there is again, another nonprofit environmental working group, ewg.org, that does a makeup database. So they've studied some of the common products and chemicals, and they show on there the rating, if it's clean or if it has. So if you don't really know what you're talking about, you can go to their cosmetic data. I think it's called Skin Deep. And again, it's a nonprofit, all free, and you can check your products. But the typical things, phthalates, parabens, polyfluorinated compounds, which are like Teflon, Gore-Tex, all these kinds of things are in our products. And so you can start to get clean. And cleaning your house, air fresheners, get rid of those because they're just VOCs unless you're using essential oils. Cleaning products, you can use water, vinegar, lemon, very simple things. You don't have to buy those chemical fancy products. Your laundry detergent, you can use very, very simple things as well. But the other thing I was going to say is very simple because this can get totally overwhelming. What I often say and teach is start with clean air, clean water, clean food. At the very core, this is accessible to everyone. How do you do that? So clean air, you need to think about the air that you're breathing. I highly recommend an air filter in your home or workplace, something with a HEPA filter and also a VOC, a volatile organic compound filter. That usually means it has a charcoal or zeolite core that will filter out those things like formaldehyde or mycotoxins as well. That's clean air. And nowadays, we really need to have air filtration in our home or workplace. clean
You have,
water.
do you
You
have
want
a
to,
recommended one that you like for the air?
yeah, so I have 5 Austin Airs at work and 3 at home. That's my favorite. But also Air Doctor and Air Oasis are two great brands as well.
Yeah,
Or
Air
sorry,
Doctor is
IQ Air.
Air
Yeah.
Doctor is the one I have as well. Yeah,
Hmm.
interesting. What
Yeah.
was the first one that you said you like? Well,
Austin Air is my
Austin.
very favorite. I have,
Great.
like I said, 7 or 8 of those all over my home workplace. And then, so that's clean air, clean water. You want to make sure you're not drinking from plastic water bottles. Even if they say they're BPA free, the plastic is plastic is plastic. Try to avoid plastic and make sure that you either, if you can afford a reverse osmosis system in your house, that's great. But even a pitcher in your fridge, I live in a condo, so the RO system's harder to install. And I just have a really good fridge system with a pitcher, and it works fantastic. It's not expensive and it filters out 200 plus chemicals. But you need to make sure you're drinking filtered water, not tap water, because even the city water supplies have issues with PFAs. They just tested Colorado last year, and every single source they tested in my state had evidence of elevated polyfluorinated compounds, which are forever chemicals. Those are those Teflon Gore-Tex derivatives. And so those are not going to go anywhere soon. So we need to be filtering our water. And then clean food. You really need to think about where you're getting your food, the kinds of oils that are being used. You want to make sure if you can buy organic, local, whenever possible, all those kinds of things, that very basic, the things that don't have more than 5 ingredients.
Yeah. What are some last question on the nutrition food part? What are the things that you think? Because I know we didn't even get to this. We didn't have time. Maybe on the next time we will. But I know you're also an expert in gut health, and obviously there's a big connection with the gut and the mind and people the way they feel. We know that seed oils are in everything. You can barely find a salad dressing without seed oils, which is
Yeah.
just incredible. So what are the ones that you would like? What's an absolute no for you? Like, is it fried foods, alcohol, seed oil? Like, what are some of the ones where you're just like, don't do this at all?
Oh, that's a good one. So oils is huge. I absolutely don't do any seed oils.
Mhm.
And where you're going to get that is if you're taking out fast food, even regular food. If you're eating out a lot, it's really hard unless like I'm in Boulder and there are some really clean organic places, but that is not common across the country. So generally, if you're eating most of your meals out, there is no way to be very healthy that way. It just isn't. You have to make some of your own food or get a service or, there's ways to do it. You don't have to cook everything, but you have to be involved to some extent because most of the restaurants are not going to be using the good oils. Second, if you do eat meat, I am a big fan of a more plant-based paleo, which is kind of the best of both worlds. In order to create diversity in your gut, you must have plants in your diet. And so I'm a huge fan of plant-based diets. However, temporarily, some people on a keto diet I use all different types of diets. So if someone's looking for dementia, brain health, or hormone balance or weight loss, keto diets can be great, but that's like 80% fat. So it's hard to get enough plants in there, right? But there's always this balance. And no matter what kind of restriction, whether you're low oxalate, low sugar, paleo, plant based, keto, I use all of these. There's no bad one. However, you really want to make sure you're getting plant based fibers to feed your microbiome because if you're eliminating those fibrous foods for a long period of time, you lose diversity in the microbiome, and that's key. And that really only comes from plants and seeds. So my primary diet is nuts and seeds. I don't do grains. I don't do legumes. I do fish, and that's about it for meat. So I'm more plant based, but I definitely still have and the fish is huge too. If you can get wild and not farmed, that's a very big difference in quality and PCBs and exposures. And really, things that are like very low ingredients and very little processing is at the core.
Amazing, really, really good stuff. Dr. Jill, this has been amazing. Where can people get your book? I know you just came out with the book Unexpected. And where can people follow you and learn more if they want to work with you?
Yeah, thank you so much, Taylor. Yeah, all of this is in the book, plus my story. It's just called Unexpected, Finding Resilience Through Functional Medicine, Science and Faith. And you can get that plus the free chapter at readunexpected.com, just READ, unexpected.com. If you want to find my work, my blog, my podcast is just my name, jillcarnahan.com. And be sure and follow me on Instagram where I put all kinds of fun blogs and podcasts and articles. I'll be posting this one there. That's just Dr. Jill Carnahan.
Amazing. Thank you so much. This has been really great. It's been a lot of fun. I love talking about a lot of the mindset stuff. And then obviously we added some great health tips there as well at the end. So really enjoy it and hope to do it again soon. And yeah, I'm definitely going to check out your book as well. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, can you please leave us a rating or review and subscribe? I've realized that while we have actually increased our downloads a lot, we're actually getting a lot of downloads, which I'm really happy about. We actually have very few ratings. And I realized that I've never asked people really to rate much. So I'm asking you now if you could please rate and review and subscribe. And if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to anyone that you think will get value out of this. Also, if you haven't checked out our line of products at buypeakperformance.com, you get 20% off your first order. That's www.buypeakperformance.com. We have some incredible products, including our organic high-altitude coffee. If you don't know this, coffee is one of the most heavily sprayed with pesticides out of any crop. So it's really important that you drink organic coffee. We've gone above and beyond to source what we believe is the highest quality and healthiest organic coffee in the world. We're also famous for our organic green superfood powder. You can get 20% off of that as well at buypeakperformance.com. We also have an organic, vegan, and paleo plant protein. See, most of the vegan proteins out there are using brown rice protein, which is really not a good source of protein, and it's also a grain. And if you're paleo, you know that grains tend to cause inflammation in some cases for some people. And so we wanted to make one that was paleo friendly and vegan and organic. We made an amazing amino acid profile, so it's really one of the best plant proteins for muscle building. So you can check out Peak Performance Organic Plant Protein. You can find that on our website. Of course, all our products are on Amazon as well. So thanks again. And again, please, if you enjoyed the episode, please forward it along to someone who you feel can get value out of it. And please leave us a rating, review, and subscribe. Thank you.